everyone. Welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
I'm Abby, your resident author.
As they say, welcome back. We are at episode 10. What causes damage? We are inching closer towards answering a cliffhanger we've been sort of dangling since the very beginning, eh, Abby?
That is true. We've talked a little bit about damage, but we haven't covered what causes it yet.
Hmm.
And Ian, I think we should jump into it. What causes damage?
What causes damage? Well, we still can't dive right for that yet. You know, if you were interested in a thunderstorm, you would say, oh, that's a thunderstorm and that's a thunderstorm. And then you would say, well, why is the thunderstorm there? But first, before you could do that, you would have to talk about different types of clouds and pressure zones and warm and cold fronts and these sort of things that I know nothing about. And I wish someone would teach me about those things.
But we are going to answer this question today. As we continue forward in this channel, we will get more into it, more in depth, more examples, but we will answer the question today, what causes damage? At least a cursory answer.
You are a harsh taskmistress.
I know what the internet wants. The internet wants us to get to the point.
So, the way we get there, the next stepping stone and the bridge to this answer comes in the form of a bat. A friendly little bat. And in the book, we talk about a bat having these two wings. Mm. And as you know, the bat has the little leathery wings that it flaps about on so gracefully.
Sorry. The camera is shaking. Archie, the corgi, is sitting next to it, and he keeps shaking the stand the camera's on. So if you got a little bit of turbulence there, it's just Archie.
Also, it's not you, it's us.
It's us. Also, I super love bats. And I love and hate this metaphor, but just know that we are a pro-bat household. Misunderstood little creatures.
And so the bat has two wings. Hey, Abby, doesn't it flutter around on two wings? And we call the bat love in the analogy, and the bat's wings are the wings of love. And we postulate that love can soar using these two things, which are proximity and codependence. How nice. Hey, Abby?
Yes.
And so why do we say that? Well, we base a lot of our observations and our logical conclusions, we find, in evolution. Mm-hmm. And when mammals started really transitioning to become gregarious pack animals, we notice that they develop certain rules to exist in a society. Now, a pack is stronger than an individual. And you can see that because one wolf can't kill a caribou, but many wolves are able to kill the caribou. And so a society is actually greater than the sum of its parts. Mm-hmm. And this is probably why evolution encouraged gregarious packs to form. But in so doing, there's also a trade-off. There has to be cooperation within the pack. And so what things do we commonly notice in these packs? Well, they're often always near each other. They're always close by. Mm-hmm. The pack is centralized.
Interdependent.
Yes. And also, they depend on each other. As Abby says, they're codependent. That is the true strength of it because, in a pack of lions, for example, we have some lions that watch the cubs while the others go off and hunt. Different roles that are filled that allow the strength of that sum to shine. And so aren't these the wings of love? So perhaps, Abby, you could give an example of codependence in today's society, for example.
So one example would be that of a police officer.
Mm.
So thank you for that. It's like a cheers.
I salute your example.
It's a good one. He made me think of it, which is even better. So in society, we require police officers to defend us in an ideal situation. Now, I will take a beat to recognize that internationally and in some countries specifically, there is some discontent and some mistrust within some police officer areas. We're not talking about that. We're talking about in a society where there's no reason for the police force to be distrust. They are trained officers doing their jobs. So the citizens are supposed to be able to trust that the police officers will come if they are called to help them in an emergency situation. And the police officers have to trust that we will cooperate with them when they give instructions, that we will continue to encourage the government to pay their salaries because they are a vital part of society.
Well, that's a good one, right? For example, in Canada, where we live, there are very restrictive laws on firearms.
Yes.
And so, and Australia is another great example, much even more global ban on firearms.
Yeah.
And the idea being the citizens will give up their rights to firearms, and we depend on the police to come to our aid because we have given up our greatest tool to defend ourselves. And of course, on the flip side, as I've mentioned, the police officers rely on the goodwill of the population to continue paying their taxes and to continue to help them with their duties.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way, society can thrive because not everyone has to defend their own properties and their own rights and at all times. So just like one lion that can do one task and one lion does another. Or another example is you see in gorillas and chimpanzees, we have some that are, well, I really don't know exactly what the job titles are in the chimpanzee realm, but I think some are maybe picking lice out of their friend's hair.
Gathering food.
Some might be gathering food. Some might be babysitting. I know some apes will babysit, for example. The point is, that is a great example of codependence. And proximity, the other wing of love, I always like to think that proximity has to be eye contact. We put that in the book, that eye contact is important for proximity, because you may say, well, Ian and Abby, people can be halfway around the world, but stay in contact through Zoom and other things like YouTube. But we argue that the base level that forms love, the instinctive level where love from, it came from being so close to another person that you could look them in the eye. And it's sort of an example of how proximity can engender love is if you look at, did you have a roommate in university?
I have severe anaphylaxis, so I had roommates that shared the room next door. I had my own room because they didn't trust anyone not to kill me.
Okay, so
did you have a roommate in university?
So if you've ever been in a situation where you have a roommate, you will find, most people will experience, that for the first little bit of the relationship, each party is trying to be extra nice to the other person. And this is because when you're forced in a close proximity with another person, you tend to want to get along with them. Now, because of damage and other reasons, it's very common to see these relationships degrade quickly and horrifically. But at least initially, the idea is we want to be nice to people who are close to us. And I think instinctively, we can probably trace that right back to our animal ancestors who would depend on the person who is resting beside them to A, not chew on them in their sleep, or B, if there was a predator, band together and defend from the predator. So the idea of proximity comes from there. That's why we argue it's an ingredient where love springs from, because in that pack of lions, that feeling of love would have arisen from the idea that there was a benefit from being proximal to someone. And then, of course, codependence, another great example that most people can relate to, would be like a group project in school. Don't you find that people in a group project might try and get along with each other?
It behooves them, because if the teacher mandates that you have one grade for everybody as a summation of everyone's collective work, and you have one person that refuses to work, the teacher could say, well, if that person continues to refuse to work, you're all having a lower grade because of that one person. So it is important that everybody pulls their weight, because their collective fate of their grade depends on how well they perform as a united front.
Yes, and Abby, as a teacher, I'm sure you've seen things go well in that vein, or go south even.
I've seen things.
She has seen things. She is a seer.
Seer of teenagers trying and not always trying their best.
Yikes. But these are the wings of love. Now, what's our chapter called? What causes damage? So, just like our bat that flies in these two wings, if a wing were to get ripped or torn, even a little bit or a lot, the bat might go and not be able to fly. Hey, Abby.
This is why I earlier said I love and hate this analogy, because I do love little bats.
Yeah.
But I hate the thought of a bat being in pain.
That is true. This is going to be a hypothetical bat. No bats were harmed in the making of this analogy.
That is true. Yes.
So let us say, what is a twig, what is a protruding branch in our lives that could impact both spending time with people in close proximity with people and also depending on people?
I know.
You do?
I do.
And what do you say?
Unmoderated technology.
Unmoderated technology. So there we have it. A cornerstone of our theory is that when you look at civilization from the Industrial Revolution sort of to today, we believe that we see a reduction of immediate codependency and proximity. Why don't we take them one at a time very quickly through that? So how would proximity have changed from 500 years ago to today, would you say, because of technology?
So I'd like to use the example of neighbors.
Hmm?
It's intertwined. Proximity and codependency are intertwined.
Very much, very much.
So I can't say one without the other, unless you probably can. You probably have some good examples, but my example is going to use a little bit of both. So even 100 years ago, your next door neighbor might be someone that you have to get along with. You need to know. Cat fur on my nose, don't mind me. So your next door neighbor is someone you would have to have known because let's say you're going on vacation. Uh, Technology wasn't as advanced, so fewer people had cars. I remember my grandfather was a tank driver in World War II, and the reason he drove the tank was because he was one of a handful of people in the entire fleet who had a driver's license of any kind. So they made him a tank driver because he had any experience driving a car. So you can imagine if vehicles are very rare or scarce in this society, it's hard to get around. You can't go very far away from where you immediately live. So if you do happen to decide to take a journey somewhere, your neighbors, the people closest to you, would be the most ideal to water your plants, care for your animals, keep an eye on the post, make sure if anything suspicious happens, they know you well enough that if you say no one should come into my house while I'm gone and they notice someone climbing in through a window, they can call for the police. So having somebody you trust be nearby was a very beneficial thing to have.
And another common example is how much time do we really spend with our own families and with our friends because everyone's sort of glued to their phones or their screens. In the last 20 years, that's been very common. And then you go a little bit farther back, people are watching TV more. That becomes developed. You go a little further back, it's the start of cinema. But as you go further back in time, before technology allowed entertainment to kind of come into our lives, people depended on other people for entertainment. And that's where you got a lot of the proximity. So I bet you if you took how many minutes, let's just take this as an example. Let's say you're a family person and you have a child or your parents are nearby. You probably spend far less time talking to them today on average than if you had been born a couple hundred years ago or 50 years ago. It sort of goes in an inverse correlation. So that's a great example of proximity.
I'm looking forward to hearing your example.
Of proximity?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can think of the technology that's allowed people to travel and disperse so far. So if you look at how societies and communities were historically, I think we can agree that societies were very tight-knit. People didn't generally move away too far from where they were born. I bet you if you took the average distance a person died from when they were born back in the day, it would be pretty close.
Actually, it's a fun random aside. I love reading National Geographic, and apparently, 50 plus years ago, they did a study of all of the data of marriage licenses, and more than half of all people, when you wrote down the address of the two people getting married, at the time it was the bride and groom because that's what the laws dictated. They were within 3 blocks of each other. And then the other remaining percent was not that much farther away, but like within 3 blocks. Most people married someone within 3 blocks. Isn't that crazy? Because that's who you met. Those were the people you had access to.
Those are the people. Now, there are some exceptions because there are periods of immigration in history where someone might have packed up from, England and moved to the United States, for example. But generally, that's a good example. Now we see families are usually dispersed throughout countries or large areas. On average, there's more kilometers between family members today than there was before. And so necessarily, those families are not spending as much time together. Now, if you went back to, again, historical communities, you're spending all your time with your family. You're always doing things with them, always looking at them, always seeing them. We have proximity, that essential ingredient. So technology that provides entertainment sequesters people from others in today's society, and traveling and infrastructure technology that allows people just to kind of blow with the wind. Now, there are positives to these things also. There's no doubt about it. But when we look at love, we can see a weakening there. Now, codependence, the other wing. And Abby's right. Sometimes these vines are very twisted together. But to isolate one, codependence, as an example, the people who bake your bread. Did you pick up any bread recently?
I have a bakery, so I make my own bread.
So Abby's not the perfect person to ask. Abby, do you think an average person in Canada has picked up a loaf of bread recently at the store?
You asked me specifically.
And what a fool I was.
We shopped together,
Yeah, that was
a bad example.
That's on me, folks.
That's our spicy date night. We go out grocery shopping together.
It is very spicy, but
we buy peppers.
Oh, because it's spicy.
Yes. So I think
that's very spicy. And so, if we again turn to it, perhaps a more average situation, you say that maybe someone has purchased bread from a store.
Yes, it is a thing people can do, in fact.
If they're not loafing around. We actually don't do puns this much. I don't know if it's a good thing.
It was the yeast we could do.
Apparently it's a good thing. So now, codependence, it's very unlikely that people in 2026 who buy a loaf of bread from a store, the grocery store, would know the person that made the bread. They might know the company, but it's pretty unlikely they know the headquarters or the individual who made it. It's hard to feel a sensation of love from a faceless entity. But if you go back a couple hundred years, the person who made your bread might have been probably someone up the street or someone you bought it from.
Carl, the bread maker.
Usually it's Carl. It's typical. And so that's a simple example of how codependence, the person we rely on for something and who relies on us in turn for trade or for an exchange or whatever, has diminished because maybe Carl gave us a piece of bread in exchange for, back in the day, we might produce shoes.
I was thinking shoes. That was my example. I was thinking of leather shoes. I don't know why. Crazy.
That is crazy. So anyway, that would be like an example of how codependence worked with a face on it. And now today, of course, we don't do exchanges like that. It's very sterile and very faceless. And so that's how the bat's wings have been torn through technology. And as Abby points out, unmoderated technology, because as we're going to talk about, some technology is going to be important for humanity to succeed, for the cup to be refilled. But at the rate we're going now, anything goes. Whatever is the most profitable and the most seemingly efficient, the most instant gratification will win out, and it has become unmoderated.
Can we delve a little deeper into your bread example? Because I really like that.
The example of codependence?
Yes, and it sort of, again, intertwines with proximity.
For sure.
But just to sort of illustrate why it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because going to the store to buy bread inherently is not a problem. You wouldn't say that's a problem, would you? You never know. So the reason we argue that it is a shame that we are losing proximity and codependence, as an example in bread. So let's say there is one baker in your town and they make the loaves of bread. Because you have that one-on-one connection, they might make special bread for you for your birthday. They might take into account allergies. They will have a very high standard of quality because you know who made it and you will directly tell them if there's a problem. So they don't want to have a negative interaction with you. They have to deal with you every day or several times a week. So they have to make sure it's a quality product. And in turn, if they have a hard time, they fall off, let's say they break their arm and they can't knead the dough, people are more likely to come and support that person and do things that don't necessarily benefit them, i.e., show love and sacrifice to help them get out of a rough spot for the long-term benefit of the community, to allow them to again have access to bread and wheat products. Today, you'll probably notice, I have noticed, in just the last few months, there has been a surge of recalls for food products, along with other products, because somewhere in the manufacturing process, someone did not follow the safety precautions. We all blindly just assume if it's being sold in a store, it must be safe. Mm-hmm. And there was a salmonella outbreak with pistachios. There's a bunch of baby food, 3 or 4 baby food recalls I've seen recently, where it could kill the baby. Because as you probably know, the younger someone is, the less likely they've had inoculations, the less their immune system is robust, and the more likely a simple disease is likely to kill them, which is very dark. I'm turning into you now.
My goodness.
I'm now the grim dingy.
The gringy, if you will.
But nowadays, the standard of quality isn't there all the time, because it's hard to blame just one person, so it's easy to pass off the blame. And it's easy to allow things to slip through the cracks and for quality to go downhill, and no one cares. There's been a surge of processed foods, of food items that some are arguing aren't fit for human consumption, like that red dye and the yellow dye. They're banning them now. But as of this moment, I think they're still selling them in
a true menace to society.
But as an example, all of these things, if you knew the people making the food and they knew you, they'd be more likely to want to use quality products. They'd be more likely to have a standard of care and make sure that everything was done properly. And if there was an issue, they'd be likely to tell you immediately and try to rectify it. Mm-hmm. Whereas nowadays, we are just dealing with people getting sick and reporting it, and then that leads to a recall, and not much happens after that. And if there is a crisis on the flip side in a company that might have ethics, there are so many companies that people just don't care. If the best bread maker in the world, they are able to mass produce bread ethically, they source all of their ingredients well, they pay all of their employees properly, they go into financial hardship because their bread's a little bit more expensive. Instead of the community banding together to try to support that company, they might say, I'll just go for the cheapest bread because it doesn't have any ingredients that are actually food in it, but it's cheaper, so I may as well just buy it. I don't care.
These are dangerous breads, folks. Be alive to that. And Abby's right. And so maybe I actually didn't tie a bow on this one, but that technology has allowed the bread maker, and every product has become the bread maker. The people who make clothes, the people who provide security, anything you can think of has sort of been outsourced farther and farther away until it's become sort of a faceless and non-identifiable entity. And that is because of transportation technology and preservation technology and refrigeration technology, all the perks that cunning science has developed for us have turned and ripped those wings of love. Now, there's one other kind of codependency and proximity we should talk about, which is between a parent and a child. And you might say, Ian, Abby, what doth thou speak of? For ye are of old medieval yore.
Ye be needing some leeches to balance your humors.
No,
the fire is back. I told you, this is what I live with.
It's pretty rough. But if we look at a child and a parent, do you think that there would be a lot of proximity between a very young infant and their parent figure?
I think there would have to be, because I understand that very young babies need to be changed and fed regularly, much more often and frequently than regular adult humans would be.
They just depend on their parents for so much, don't they? All these essential things that, as an older person, you can do independently. A child, especially a very young child, needs a lot of proximity. Being read to and taught how to read, being taught how to speak, walk, everything. So that relationship between parent and child, especially under the age of 5, 6, let's say, is loaded, or supposed to be loaded, with proximity. Now, also codependence. You might say, well, true, the child depends on the parent, but that's not codependency, that's dependency, Ian and Abby. You fools. Why do you even suggest that? But, Abby, what about the story of the seasons? Doesn't that tell us that as someone becomes old, they become a child in turn past the age of 75?
Yes. So we mentioned in a previous episode that after the age of 75, sometimes a little sooner, depending on how your life went,
or later, if things are going well.
Yeah, you revert back to being a child. I know some people in their mid 70s who are absolutely thriving, and I've met people in their 50s who they hit their old age too early, and that sucks. But we understand as a society that we have compassion. That's what we're supposed to do as humans. But once you reach a certain point, your body starts to deteriorate a little bit more, and you can't do things as well as you might once have. And also, you've spent so many years, allegedly, giving to society and sacrificing for society and showing love to yourself and others in society that you deserve to have that benefit recuperated. So initially, when parents had children, it was expected that when the parent got to retirement age, the child would take the parent into their home and care for them until they passed on. It was expected. That was the retirement plan.
That's right. So we have a chronological codependency where a young child depends on the parent, but as time goes on, the child becomes the adult, and that parent who of the erstwhile child now actually becomes the child of their child and needs their support in old age. It's common conception, or it's socially expected that when a child gets a certain age, they start taking care of their parent when the parent needs it. And it reminds me a little bit of a fire, for example. Let's take a fire, and you have a nice little teepee of wood that you want to light on fire. Well, at first, you need to be very careful of the little flame that's growing, and you have to protect it from the wind and from any drops of rain that fall, and you have to blow on it lovingly. As such, exactly that. And that is like how the child needs protection until it ignites the wood and it's self-sustaining. But then, as time goes by, just like a person's life, as Abby said, they make sacrifices, they go through aging, which affects both the mind and the body. That wood starts to burn down into sort of embers, and it needs help to stay lit. Maybe a few more pieces of wood are added. And so just like a fire, a human has two periods of vulnerability where they are a child. And so that's how a human, our parent and child, develop that codependency, because we all are going to need that. And the same is true of animals who live in packs. And those are very profound. We're going to talk about this later, but those dependencies and those proximities are much more amplified between a child and a parent. We're going to talk about why that's so important later. But do you think, Abby, can you think of any ways perhaps that technology has affected proximity and codependence, specifically between parent and child?
So I'm going to say what I always say is I read a lot of articles about this, and I read a couple books about this. And I think it's fascinating. So they actually passed a law in China that forces people to visit their aging parents. At least I don't know if it's once a week or once a month, but they actually passed a law that forces them to visit them because technology, i.e., retirement homes, outsourcing to sort of your parent could live somewhere and be fine, and there's no requirement from you to see them. So society has shifted a little bit, Ian. So parents no longer expect their children to take care of them in old age. And in fact, a surprising number who do expect that are sorely disappointed and find that their children go from spending their own resources in attempt to help their parent be comfortable and happy in their retirement age to waiting for the parent to pass on so they can sort of take whatever they can from their parent. And there have been cases, unfortunately, of I don't know what you're looking at now.
Because you were saying taking things, and it made me think of looting. And last time, I don't know why, it just occurred to me. Yes, you're quite right. I'm sorry, I was thinking of looting parents.
Well, that was what my point was going to be. People, if dementia and Alzheimer's the numbers are increasing. Unfortunately, science is still trying to figure out exactly why. There's some ideas, but we're not positive. And there is an increase of cases of parents with dementia and Alzheimer's and their children taking advantage of that and just taking all of their money and then just leaving their parents in some kind of social housing where they don't have the resources they need to function with the disease. It's horrible.
Terrible. And so just to wrap up, and we're going to talk about a lot more about this, but in a good example of how technology, for example, screens have reduced proximity and codependence between child and parent. Well, it might be now that a parent sticks an iPad in front of their child, and walks out of the room. So there's no eye contact happening. There's no interaction happening between the parent and child. And maybe that parent has also outsourced learning to read or learning to speak to, some sort of app on an iPad. And so these are going to factor in heavily. It's going to be heavenly. It's going to be heavenly. And we're gonna leave it for the next episode. But to answer the question that's on the board, what causes damage? We're going to see technology is that branch that tears the wings of love. But don't worry, there's ways to break that branch off and heal those wings up to good as new, Abby?
Indeed. So, just because I want to.
Oh my goodness.
So, damage is caused because technology makes people feel that they're not connected anymore. Mm. And therefore, they don't feel the need to show love and or sacrifice to the person because the value of that person in your life is diminished. And the less value you see someone has in your life, the less resources you're willing to spend on them. I think that's a good summary of today's episode.
I think that is just terrific. So thank you for checking out Dancing with Damage. We hope to see you in the next episode.
Have a great day.